Today on GovCon M&A Talk, Meghan Gifford, who was instrumental in the growth and sale of Octo, a GovCon company which sold for over $1 billion. Meghan says nobody prepares you for the crisis after the sale. Today, a conversation about the people she calls the Olympic athletes of business and the crisis after the sale.
This is GovCon M&A Talk, presented by Orange Slices. I'm Sharon Heaton of sbLiftOff, and I live and breathe GovCon M&A. So let's talk deals.
Meghan, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Sharon, it is so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Really our pleasure. Now, Meghan, I want to do a quick background on you before we get into your perspective. You've been in GovCon for many years. Tell me what your GovCon background is.
Sure. I started my career in GovCon advising companies. I started at a company called Wolf Den, and I worked in M&A advisory and strategic advisory before I joined Octo, really to head up the corporate development function at Octo. At the time, Arlington Capital had just invested in Octo. It was a founder-owned and operated business, and it was time to kind of start playing in the big leagues. And I was brought on by Arlington to help lead our M&A strategy. And over that time, we did 4 acquisitions, brought them into Octo, and then at the end of 2022, sold Octo to IBM in a great outcome for that company.
Fantastic. So there were 4 acquisitions. Over what time period did those 4 acquisitions occur?
2019 to 2022, and then there was the acquisition to IBM, which I then led the integration of into IBM.
You stayed with the company after the sale of Octo to IBM. Is that correct?
I did for 2 years.
Were you leading that integration effort?
Yes.
Okay. You know as well as I do that so many of these transactions are great on paper, but they lose their value in the integration stage. It's after the deal closes that the value is lost. How did you go about going through all of these acquisitions and then this humongous deal and dealing with the integration there?
Yeah. Oh, Sharon, so many battle scars, so many mistakes, so many lessons learned. And I think in GovCon specifically in the services business, what so many people don't recognize is that we're dealing with a people business. Integrations on paper, yes, it's customers, yes, it's capabilities, yes, it's revenue, but at the heart of that, it's people. And really what I learned over time is that the success or failure of an integration comes down to really the people, how the people feel, how the people are showing up, how the people see the greater vision, if they're bought in, how they're treated. And that was really, and getting them on board and all of the things, the cultural heartbeat, how those organizations come together around that. That's the piece at the end of the day that I really saw make or break, and I mean that both ways.
First of all, incredibly important, and I couldn't agree more. You're unique because you were sat on the buy side for quite a number of deals, and it's the buyer that has to go through that integration process. So let's talk first about you as a buyer, and then we're going to talk about you as a seller, okay?
Sure.
Okay, so you're sitting there with Octo. Octo has a big pocketbook because Arlington Capital's behind them. They know that the idea is to do some inorganic growth, do some organic growth, and then probably ultimately to sale. You bought a variety of different companies for Octo. B3 at the time, I think, was still an SDVOSB, but there were other companies who were in the full and open market. How did you go about deciding? What were you looking for to say, we should pursue this acquisition?
So it was not a rigid set of criteria. We had a strategic direction for the company. We knew what we were building Octo into, and we were looking for companies to partner with that were an accelerant. There were a number of different strategic vectors or strategic plays that could really get us there. And we were looking for that 1+1 = 3. If it was something that we could go out and do on our own, probably not a very good M&A criteria candidate for us. We were really looking for those value drivers where it was creating something between the sum of the parts that we could not create on our own. And so we had a couple of different types of ways that could have played out that we were always scanning the market for. So we could be opportunistic when we found good, strong teams with strong cultures, with strong customer relationships that we really felt, wow, there's so much cross-pollination opportunity and synergy here that we could really create something special by bringing them into the fold.
And what you're saying is incredibly important. I did a podcast with Aaron Moak from Penguin.
Mm-hmm.
And Aaron has been a buyer in the past, and he basically said, we're willing to pay for the company that we're acquiring so long as it's synergistic to our organic growth, that it's not one or the other, but the two of them kind of work together. You said you would not buy a company that you could replicate, but isn't there a buy versus build element? That is, if you buy it, you can probably do it a heck of a lot faster than if you were to build it yourself.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And certainly in a private equity play like we had, there's an element of time, right? This was not a company we knew we were going to be building for 20 years. Like I said, we had a destination in mind. We knew what we were building. We knew what we were creating. And we were looking to partner with companies that were going to help us get there. And so, yes, that's absolutely true. And those probably aren't the most exciting opportunities for us. The opportunities that get us really leaning forward in value, that get us going, oof, how do we get them as part of the team? If it's something that we could build organically in 6 to 12 months, probably not something we're gonna really lean forward in value on because of that. We're really looking for those opportunities, and especially with the type of investor that Arlington Capital is, every private equity is different, but Arlington Capital is really focused on growth. So we were really focused on how is this going to increase revenue? How is this going to increase our customer access, our market access, our capability access, the skill level of our employees? Less so on the how can we financially engineer our way into cost savings? That's obviously always part of an integration, but it was really about how does this create growth for us organically?
You were on the buy side for the first 4 deals, and as an M&A advisor for sbLiftOff, we basically are telling our sellers on a regular basis, be careful with your employees, because when employees hear that there's a transaction going to occur, they think one of 3 things. I'm going to lose my job, my salary is going to get cut, or my benefits are going to get cut. And the first job after the transaction is to calm people down. Buyers don't buy companies in the lower mid-market, at least, with the idea that we're going to cut all the expenses by firing the people. The people are what make the money. So having the people feel comfortable is really important. How did you go about that for your first acquisition for Octo? Who was the first company that Octo bought that you were part of?
The first company was Conexta that we bought, and I'm going to answer your question a little bit differently, because there's something that I want to say that's actually a little bit more important, which is I think as buyers, we underestimate the psychological impact of uncertainty.
Oh gosh, yes.
And so really what we learned over the time period of the 4 deals was that the more clear and transparent we can be sooner, really to simply cut out the degree of uncertainty that is in the employees, whether good or bad, by the way. It does no good to create mystery around change, because people assume the worst. If there's a change, make the change. Even if some people are going to be upset, rip the Band-Aid. Because when the organization is carrying a load of uncertainty, it shows up, especially in a services business, with how people show up to their job, how people perform. They're carrying this psychological weight. Am I going to have a job tomorrow? Are my benefits going to be cut? And so the more clear and transparent you can be about communicating what you know, what you don't know, when they're going to know, how they're going to know, and just cutting out that weight is really, really helps the cultural cohesion, and also helps you get to the shared vision that you've done the deal for more quickly.
Very interesting. So, as you're the buyer, by the way, I totally agree with what it is you said. If people don't know, they will fill in what they don't know with
Yes.
their own speculation, and that speculation is almost never positive. So the anxiety goes up and up in the. Um, I assume in your first acquisition, you weren't quite aware of the dynamic of that, and by the fourth acquisition, you said, "Let's not make that mistake again." Is that a fair assessment?
Sharon, underestimate of the year. I mean, bless the souls of the first acquisition. We were so careful. We were so, and all from a good place, all from a good intention, but we wanted, it was slow. It was the first time we had ever done an integration. And so we were figuring it out as we were going, and we learned so much from that. And what I will say is actually even more interesting is then having the experience of being on the flip side, learned even more from that of what works and what doesn't. And so, I have a much deeper appreciation now, if I was to do it all again, about just the importance of the communication, the clarity, the consistency, and the speed and the urgency with whatever changes are going to be made, just make them and communicate them.
So, we all talk about GovCon and it's about the capabilities and the customer relations and the backlog and the margins and the this and that. And obviously you've been deeply involved in those issues, but you're coming away with a thesis of the people are ultimately the biggest volatility of whether or not a deal is going to work. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what did you learn in the first four acquisitions that you then applied when you guys were the seller?
Oof, how long do we have?
As long as we need, my friends.
Like I said, Sharon, we're in a services business. And so these, at the end of the day, what creates the revenue for our government customers? It is people showing up on site or off site doing the work. And what I noticed directly is the more that those people felt like they understood the mission, the shared vision, their place, like they were part of something bigger, they understood what that meant, they felt safe, right? The more likely they were to show up in a way that where they felt good about coming to work. And when they felt good about coming to work, their customer feels good, right? This is a people business. And so, really, I saw that as a direct, like, just think about it. If you're miserable and you don't know what's going on, how likely are you to work till 10 p.m. on a proposal? If you're not even sure if you're going to get bonused on it, you don't even know if you're going to have a job tomorrow. It's like, why am I doing this? I don't even know if I
Exactly.
belong here anymore, right?
Hmm.
And so creating cultural cohesion and a shared vision, and people feel like they belong in that, that's just like basic psychology and basic science, and also basic doing right by people. People are going to show up.
Absolutely.
And then I felt that on the other side when we were going through that, on the other side of the acquisition, positively and negatively. And it was really, I would say it was humbling, because I got to learn where we still had blind spots even by the fourth acquisition when I thought we were doing it well.
Okay. One of the things that a lot of sellers will say is, I care deeply about the culture of my firm. Completely understand.
Mhm.
But if you're being acquired by a larger entity, generally it's the larger entity's culture that's going to take over. How did you merge the culture of the four companies that you acquired into Octo, respecting what they were and why that culture was good, but making a new Octo culture?
Yeah, it's a hard question. I think that this is a diligence. This is a diligence piece, right? You want to it's important to understand what are the pieces of culture that are truly important, and what are the pieces that you want to bring into the business, especially when you're building a business that is going to be made up, like in a private equity platform, of a lot of different companies. What is your thesis around that? How are you going to actively bring some of those pieces in? And being really intentional about, what are those special pieces? What is the special thing that this organization has that we can bring in? While all the time knowing you're creating this kind of melting pot culture that exists here in this brand new entity that we're creating. So it's intention and diligence, understanding with some specificity what you're going to bring in, committing to to that, but also being clear, like, this is what we're building. This is the shared vision. This is what we're all co-creating together, right? And that's the visioning piece that lies with the acquirer, that lies with the buyer to paint so that the seller can see themselves in that vision and see that they are an important piece. And I don't just mean lip service, like, great, you're part of the family. Now, I mean, really, how is what they're bringing essential to what's being created here?
So 4 acquisitions over basically 3 years, very fast. And ultimately, there became hundreds of people, if not thousands. How were you able to reach out to those individuals to kind of keep them engaged and enthused about the company and the changes, knowing that more changes were probably coming?
Yeah. Various degrees of success and failure in change management.
Okay.
Lots of lessons learned, again, Sharon. But I think where we landed was a mix of communication. There's communication you do at the top because it needs to come from the top. There's communication that exists lower down within the organization, within the communities that the people sit within. So it's really the right communication from the right leader at the right time, and building a strategy around that was what we found to be effective.
Okay, so you go through these acquisitions and it's pretty good. I mean, Octo sold for over $1 billion. Congratulations, that's fantastic. Now you're sitting in a different seat. You're in the selling seat, not the buying seat. How did that change your thinking? Having had so much experience in buying other companies, what surprised you about being on the sell side?
I had a lot more empathy. And I thought I had a lot of empathy before, but I'll tell you, Sharon, I had a lot of empathy for what it's like to go through it on the other side.
What, as you were experiencing being sold, what were the feelings that you were having that may have surprised you? I mean, empathy for the seller is great, but what were you feeling as the seller saying, "Oh, I kind of knew this, but I didn't really know it."
I mean, to be brutally honest with you, there was like a psychological death that happened.
Okay, now we're talking.
Now we're in it. Now we're in it. I mean, to be feeling, to be kind of mourning at the same time as you're building. That was my experience. There was something that we were building, which was this new iteration of the company that I was very committed to stewarding to the best of my ability. And at the same time, I was mourning the era that Octo was, what it was when it was our vision alone as a leadership team, as a company, as an employee base that we were all holding together. And now it was in someone's hands. You know, it's like we got adopted, right? And that was the point. That was a deal we all made. And so it was very complicated, right? And where I'm showing up to create this new thing. And at the same time, I'm like, wait, but I miss the old thing, but wait, but this is what we wanted. So many complicated emotions.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So, as you're going through the sale process, one of the things that strikes me is that Octo bought 4 GovCon companies. Octo sold to IBM. IBM has it definitely does some GovCon, but is not a GovCon company. It's going to have a very different culture, orientation, background, ways of doing things, et cetera. Was that a surprise for you to see a commercial company buying such a substantial GovCon company? Was there a culture difference because of the GovCon element versus not?
IBM actually has a pretty substantial federal presence. And so we were integrated into the IBM consulting federal business. And so, yes,
Okay.
IBM's absolutely massive. Octo lives inside of IBM federal. So from a person to person basis, we were among friends. It's like, oh, hey, all of us over here serving our federal clients. That part felt culturally great. I think the part that was surprising was just peeking into the apparatus that exists beyond the federal space, right? You peek out outside of Octo and it's like, nothing's out here, right? It's just us. But you peek out beyond IBM Federal and there's a whole ecosystem of all sorts of things that comes with amazing benefits, right? Of synergy and reach back and resources, and also, a lot of bureaucracy at the same time.
So, what were the one or two lessons that you walked away with saying, if you're going to be doing an integration, let's take it first from the buyer side, because they're the ones who are really responsible for that integration. What are the two or three lessons that you think buyers should absolutely have at the front of their minds when they're doing an acquisition? Obviously, price and structure and, reps
Mhm.
and warranties, all of that matter. Let's put that aside for a moment. In order for that transaction to be worthwhile to the buyer, what do they need to be doing on the integration side?
Start planning your integration in diligence. You cannot wait until the deal is closed to pick your head up and go like, oh, how are you going to integrate this thing? You need to understand at least the high level of what your approach is for integrating in diligence. And I would highly recommend that that is at least socialized and has some level of agreement with the key management personnel that you want to retain from the seller, because they will be your person, your point person in selling that to their employees and to bringing that into fruition. And starting without those pieces in line, you're going to have a lot of friction those first couple months when you really need to be focusing on hearts and minds and communication. You want to be in sync about what your overall strategy is and in sync with the people on the seller who are going to need to be executing that strategy with you.
Okay, now let me talk about this from an M&A perspective just for a second, which is, hey, listen, there's so much going on during the transaction. You're dealing with networking capital and payables and all the rest of that. There's a little bit of a hesitation, usually by the seller, to focus on post-merger integration because it's like, first of all, that's the buyer's problem. And second is, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on right now. How do you walk and chew gum at the same time without screwing up the transaction itself by things that might be controversial post-closing?
I disagree. I find that actually there's a lot of unspoken anxiety from the seller about what's going to happen to me, what's going to happen to the business. And yes, it's touchy, right? Especially if there are major changes planned. If there are major changes planned, obviously, take that into consideration, how you're going to roll that out, have a change management plan with the seller if you need that, right? But there's actually a lot of anxiety of not knowing that creates drag on the deal. So when the
Really an
keys
excellent point. Go ahead.
when
Um,
the
you
key management personnel of the seller have uncertainty about their role, there is friction that comes up in the deal. And so being as clear as you can about that actually is like a deal, like deal lube. Like it actually helps make the deal move more quickly because people are actually, they don't have this anxiety. Oh, this deal, I get money when this deal closes, but what's going to happen to me? They actually can see how this vision is actually not just good for them short term, but long term if they're, part of that vision. So I actually think it helps.
Excellent point, and I appreciate you raising that. My understanding is that there was the deal, and then you stayed at Octo slash IBM for a couple of years, 2 years dealing with the merger integration. And I seem to recall some LinkedIn post upon you leaving, basically saying, I'm free. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm free now. So tell me what the experience was for you after being at IBM for a couple of years, saying, okay, it's time for me to move to my next chapter in life.
Can I tell you a story to answer that question?
Please.
Okay,
Yes.
Sharon. So I want to tell you a story about the day that we closed the Octo transaction. So we closed 2 days before Christmas in 2022. And I will remember this moment for the rest of my life where I'm sitting in my parents' house because it's 2 days before Christmas. And we're on the closing call. It's, we're on Zoom. It's very anticlimactic, but
Hmm.
all the lawyers say the things and the money wires around everywhere. And I hang up the call and I have this like 30 seconds of euphoria. We're like, we did it. And then just immediately I crash right back down and I watch my mind think the thought, okay, cool. What's next? And so in that moment, this milestone, which was this like top of mountain moment, this thing I had been working towards for so long, I got 30 seconds of happiness out of it. And then immediately it was like, what's my next thing to chase? And in that moment, I knew I don't know what I'm going to do, for the rest of my life, but it's not going to be continuing to chase and to chase and to chase, because I'm seeing it in this moment. I'm seeing through that. I'm seeing that this moment is, there's no fulfillment for me in it. It's, my mind just wants more. And so
Wow.
while I stayed for 2 more years at IBM to help with the integration and see that through, I knew that whole time that I was going to do something different when I left, that I wasn't just going to go take another corp dev job or, climb the bigger mountain. I knew that that my heart was calling me towards something different.
Okay. You wrote an article recently. Tell me about the article, and what the thesis is.
Yeah. So the article really came out of so many conversations I've been having recently with founders who have exited their businesses and other people in the deal ecosystem, wealth managers, lawyers, bankers, and who expect that, the exit is this moment where like everything is wonderful now, all my problems are solved. And they find a very different experience on the other side. And so the article is called What No One Tells You About Selling Your Company. And it's really exploring this phenomenon of what happens after the exit that people don't really talk about. And it is really that we view in the M&A market, we really view the exit to be like the end point. Great, you exited, yay, that's done. But it's really a beginning. It's the beginning of really a human transition, an identity transition that happens when the thing that you have poured your soul into, you've been building for maybe decades, right? The thing that, fills your entire calendar, maybe your social life, the thing that you go to a cocktail party and you tell people like, I'm the founder and CEO of XYZ thing. Suddenly, poof, like someone else owns it now. And you're sitting with the question of, well, what do I do now? Who am I? How do I introduce myself at that cocktail party now? And there is a lot of struggle that happens in this space that we don't talk about. And I find it to be a huge disservice, not only to the owners who sell, but also to our industry as a whole.
Couldn't agree more. A couple of years ago, I released a book that was published by Forbes. And the first couple of chapters, this is an M&A book, talk about emotions. Because it is so important for that business owner to understand that they are a valued human being, whether or not their name tag says CEO or president of XYZ company. It's also the reason why the name of our company is sbLiftOff. I was talking to all these people about exit planning and what kind of exit you're going to have. I'm sorry, for a baby boomer, exiting sounds like you should bring a coffin into the middle of the room and lie down in it. We want to talk about people lifting off to their next goal in life. There are stages in your life, and there's a stage when you have your company and you're growing it, and then you have a stage after that. And it's not as though you've exited, you've just gone to the next stage of your life. How do you go about the next stage of your life? I mean, the Octo experience went on for a number of years, and then the IBM experience went on for a number of years. What are you doing now?
Mm. I love the framing of that, Sharon. I'm really interested in this question of the human side of all of these things that you and I know and love, of building a business, of selling that business, of transitioning, of transitioning out of it, of what is it like as a human being to be navigating these inflection points. We have so many people we've got our bankers and our accountants and our lawyers, and I love all of them, right? And they're all focused on your money and your business. But there is an equally significant transition that's happening at each one of these inflection points, and it's in you personally. And I'm very interested and passionate about exploring with people what's happening in those moments. And so right now I'm working privately with people who are kind of going through these inflection points, whether it's an owner, a founder, an operator. And I'm really interested in just creating more conversations around these things, because every time I bring this up to someone who sold their company, even if they've been out for a couple years, anyone who works with business owners, the first thing they tell me is they're like, oh my gosh, yes, I hear this all the time. I hear this all the time. But we're not actually having the conversation. And I really think that it's a disservice to our industry, because when we take these brilliant business owners, right, who have poured their hearts and their souls into a mission to build their business, and then come out on the other side and go through what I've seen over and over again in the people that I talk with and work with, is kind of like a little bit of an existential crisis. And they don't, and we're not normalizing or talking about that and supporting them through that. Their like capacity goes dormant. Their capacity to create, to contribute, to mentor, like to contribute back all of their wisdom, all of their knowledge, all of their stewardship, like all of the magic they've earned through all of the things they've created, kind of just like goes offline, because they're like, oh shoot, what am I supposed to do now? And I think that's such a loss.
When we're talking to potential sellers, we say two things need to be ready in order to bring your company to market. The first is, of course, the company needs to be ready, but more importantly, the owner needs to be ready.
Yeah.
And the owner needs to be ready in two different ways. One is, that's the time to do your wealth planning and your trust and estates. Please don't tell me that you moved to Florida during the middle of the deal. That's not the time to do it. But the second thing that the owner needs to do is to figure out what their life is going to be. When I basically talk to people who are thinking about selling and they say, oh, I'm going to play golf every day, I'm going to use my boat all the time. It's like, oh, you've got a problem coming, because golf gets boring when you're doing it 7 days a week. The boat is not as interesting when you can do it whenever you want. You've got to figure out something that's meaningful, purposeful, that gives joy to you as a human after selling that company.
You are spot on. And my direct experience is that most people who are these Olympic athletes of business that you mentioned at the front, right? They don't, the only way they know how to answer that question is to do the thing they've done before. And it's very uncomfortable to sit in that question and not know the answer. And so they rush back into something and then they're like, why doesn't this feel good? They want to solve the problem really fast. And so actually what you mentioned is spot on, Sharon. And that's exactly where conversation like this and support for those people, even just like a thinking partner in those moments, to really help them discern for maybe the first time in their lives when they've really truly had the freedom to sit with the question of, wow, I don't need to worry about my financial stability anymore. For me, maybe just me, maybe me and my children and children after, depending on what kind of exit they had. I'm free of that burden. And I'm free of the role that I played where everyone relied on me for the past, whatever, decades. What is important to me now, really? And so many people miss the opportunity to really ask themselves that question and get clear on it, because they rush back into something because they're uncomfortable sitting in that question. And I personally am sad for what we all miss from what that person could contribute and could create in this world if they sat long enough in that question to really listen to the answer.
And it's a great point. And another way of thinking about it is that whenever the end comes, it's the sale, it's the post-merger integration, whenever you have that chance, take 2 or 3 months to decompress. Running a company, growing a company, selling a company is a big deal. And it takes all of your emotional effort, intellectual effort, all of your energy. And I find that people are often very depleted afterwards, and they're saying, I should feel fantastic. I just got this liquidity event. I have had the culmination of my dreams. This is wonderful. And you lasted 30 seconds. I find people tend to last a couple of days, maybe a weekend. And then they have these existential thoughts. And I would love to basically say, take a breath. Plan on 2 or 3 months of just absorbing where you are. Sit with the questions, don't have an answer immediately. I think as business people, we're expected to come up with answers quickly. And this is a time in your life where you actually have a chance to stop and think and make choices. Does that make sense to you?
It makes perfect sense. And I would almost say it more directively, like don't do anything at first. You will almost certainly make a mistake. You will almost certainly make a choice that you will look back and regret if you do it in the first couple months. And I mean that from speaking to many founders who have been in the same position. I was speaking to a post-exit founder recently who is in year 3. And he was telling me that he's just starting to feel normal again. That's 3 years. So I really want to normalize the timeline. Think about it if you've been sprinting at this for 2 decades and we think that we're going to take a weekend off and decompress. That's kind of BS. Like our whole system needs to reset from this, and it takes a long time. So part of this is like, let's normalize it. Let's normalize it when someone asks you at the cocktail party, what are you doing next? It's perfectly acceptable and actually kind of a flex to say like, I don't know. And that's awesome. Like, let's normalize that answer. That's a great answer.
I love that answer. That's a great answer. Now, before we close, I want to go back to a phrase that you have used, which is the Olympic athletes of business. Great phrase. What did you mean by that? Who were you referring to?
The person who sacrificed everything, who took the risk, who said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start a company, and who bet themselves, their family, the time, showed up day after day, believed in the vision, even when it was unbelievable, stuck with it, like blood, sweat, tears, saw it out to the very end, and now have this amazing outcome on the other side that they've created. Like they've literally created that from their own belief, their own tenacity, their own trust in themselves. And it is my deepest wish that that person gets to experience on the other side the life that lights them up, that brings them to life so deeply, like that they get to feel so alive and purposeful and turned on in their life, because that's what all of that was for. That can be what all of that was for if they choose it.
That's a wonderful way of saying it. The founder owner is the person who sits at their kitchen table and comes up with an idea and turns that idea into money. We have fairy tales about people turning straw into gold. Well, that's what creating a business is. You're turning an idea into money and then they create jobs and they pay taxes and they do all these wonderful things that our economy is incredibly dependent upon them doing. These are wonderful people. I'm honored to work with them. I think that you are as well.
I'm inspired by them. They're alchemist magic, and I completely agree with you. Yep.
Meghan, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a wonderful conversation.